Hello everyone, I thought we'd start just a little bit early, just so I can make sure everything's working. So as usual, if you can hear what I'm saying, if the volume's okay at your end, if you could let me know. Hopefully I think everything should be all right now. I think we have solved some of the microphone issues that we had at the beginning of this. If you're having an issue, but you make sure your YouTube volume is turned up down there. So the format for today, we do this regularly every Friday now, 2:30. So I'll go through what's been the major markets over the last week, what to look out for next week. So we'll do indices, FX, commodities, crypto, the usual stuff. Then I'll talk about a few markets that I think are interesting. We've seen some quite big moves in the likes of palladium and platinum this week, so we'll take a look at those as well. And then, as usual, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. And once I've been through the stuff that we normally look at, I'll go back through the chat. Let's just do the risk warning. It's important to remember this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and contracts for difference are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 71.2% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Right, so let's get straight into it. Let's look at some of the important events for next week before we catch up on what happened this week. Interest rates next week. So Tuesday, the 27th of April, Japanese interest rate decision. Wednesday, the 28th of April, US interest rate decision. Normally a big one. Wednesday night, UK time anyway. So clearly with some concerns out there about inflation. Interest rates are going to be, I think, more closely watched than perhaps they have been for a while. And then next week, next Friday, 30th of April, the latest EU GDP numbers. So how well or how badly has the European economy done in the current quarter? So I think a few major bits to keep an eye on next week. Let's have a quick catch up with markets so far this week. Stock markets, quite a bit of volatility yesterday in stocks. US stock markets fell heavily on suggestions that one of the things that President Biden is going to do is change the capital gains tax rate in the US, pushing it up. I think if you're of a certain income bracket, I think was it $1 million or over, pushing it up to about 40%. Markets didn't like that, so sold off fairly sharply, but we'll take a look at that. I think it's just a bit of a short-term knee-jerk reaction, but we'll jump onto the platform in a sec and take a look at that. Gold and silver, I think a good week overall. Both rally on US dollar weakness, so we did see, I think, a bit of a move in both of those. We did do the silver video, went out yesterday. I think we do have a short-term recovery going on in silver. We'll take a look at that. Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin back below 50K. It's quite a big fall in Bitcoin, I think, over the last few days. For me, that trend is still up, so it's still a buying opportunity. But because of the volatility, clearly, if you're trading Bitcoin, you need to give it quite a bit of leeway when it comes to stop losses and stuff. So we'll take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum during this. Crude oil, it did have a bit of a run, didn't it, about a week ago. It's pulled back into the previous range over the last couple of days. So I do wonder if that's a buying opportunity in crude oil going into next week. So we'll take a look at that. Foreign exchange, lots of volatility this week, but not much change from a week ago. I don't think for euro, US dollar and pound against the dollar, but we will take a look at those. Some big swings. I do still think we could see further gains for the pound and the euro from here. So we'll take a look at that. And that's it. So that's the update on what's been moving. So let's get into it. and jump on the platform. I thought we'll start off with stocks. Here's the S&P. This was the move yesterday. You can see when the news broke about these potential tax changes or plans to maybe change taxes. So the S&P was trading at 4,180, got knocked back 50 points. These are hourly candles. So, a decent, what's that, a 1% move, just over 1% move in the S&P on the rumblings of these tax changes. But, look at the trend. This is still an hourly chart. We'll take a look at the daily in a minute. For me, today will be an interesting session. Where it got knocked back to yesterday was only the lows of the day before and the day before that. So it got not back to Tuesday, Wednesday lows. If we look at stock markets, the trend is still very much up in stock markets. It was only a week ago, this time last week, that US stock markets hit, the S&P anyway, hit a fresh all-time high. You can see, looking at the daily candles this week, bang, 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 up one day, down the next, pretty sideways week. But, clearly, overall, the trend is still up. So that's it. It's still a buy the dips market for me. So if we look on the hourly chart, going into today, I'd be watching these levels actually from the 14th of April, which was, when was that? Last Wednesday. 41.20 has been a pretty good floor for the S&P. It traded down last night to 41.25, and we're at 41.46 today. So my money would be on something of a recovery today after yesterday's somewhat knee-jerk reaction. We'll see how it pans out. NASDAQ 100, if we have a look at the dailies on that, there we go, pretty much the same sort of week for the NASDAQ, up one day, down the next, but overall, the trend for the NASDAQ still up. Lots of support coming in from the March lows, around about 12,200. If you can hear some banging in the background, there's someone in the office next door is moving office at the moment. I think they're dismantling their shelves. Hopefully that won't take too long. But the trend for the S&P, the NASDAQ, still very much up. I think levels to watch going into today. I think it's pretty much like the S&P yesterday. That again, this is when the news comes out. The NASDAQ was at 13,960, so lost nearly 250 points in not much more than an hour. But for the last week on the NASDAQ, 13,650 has been a good base. So it will be interesting to see if we see these stock markets recover today. Let's have a look at the DAX. I don't have it in here. Let's bring that one up. German market. Let's take a look at that. So again, trend still up, a little bit of a boring week overall on the DAX, but still positive. We saw those fresh all-time highs a week ago for the DAX. Bring the FTSE up. Take a look at that, FTSE 100. I think the FTSE is interesting because the FTSE does occasionally, or quite a lot of the time, almost do its own thing compared to other stock markets, because the FTSE 100, is weighted perhaps more to the financial sector and oil companies, and clearly what goes on with the pound has an impact on the FTSE as well. But I think it's interesting, the move we've seen over the last few days, back down to this trend since November, this recovery trend off the November lows. So support, short-term support ahead of 6,800. I think it's interesting that that's held. And these levels up here on the FTSE, just from over the last week or so, were pretty much the best levels since Feb last year. So other markets have pushed out to all-time highs, stock markets, but the FTSE hasn't. And finally, on stock indices, the Japanese market, the Nikkei. Let's have a look at that. It's been a bit directionless, maybe. I think it's interesting. The last couple of days have been interesting because it's been banging around a bit sideways, the Japanese market, over the last couple of months. But we do have a definite floor at 28,000 on the Japanese market, so far at least. And it has held it up. We've seen it bounce again this week. But we don't have, over the last month anyway, as clear a trend as we've had in some of these other stock markets. So there we go. That's stocks. Let's take a look. Let's do cryptos for a change. Let's take a look at the world of cryptocurrencies. So like I said, a big move in Bitcoin. Well, actually big in percentage terms, but nothing really out of the ordinary. you know, it was 64,700 on the 14th of April. It's traded to 50,000 today. So it's dropped 20% in the last week and a bit, which for most markets is a big move. But, you know, if we look at the sort of pullbacks that you get historically, it's not a big move. You know, I often say I don't really trade cryptos that much. And for me, because the volatility is off the scale compared to other markets, it just doesn't suit my trading style. And I think again, I think it attracts a lot of novice traders, cryptocurrencies, and it's great when the market is going up. But I think if it goes the wrong way, a lot of people can get wrong-footed. But if we look at it like any other market, then clearly the Bitcoin trend since October is still up. We've got trendline support coming in about 35,000 for Bitcoin. What's interesting for me, if I was going to trade it now, I wouldn't trade it today. I'd wait for some strength to come in, but I'd still want to be a buyer on dips because the trend is up. We've got support, March support down at 50,400. Let's call it 50K is support for Bitcoin. Bigger support out here at 43,000. So for me, you know, the setup would be if we saw some strength next week, if we saw it stop going down next week, I could be interested in being a buyer, and I'd put my stop the other side of 43K, the late February lows for Bitcoin. But a reminder there, just in case anybody needed it, that no market moves in a straight line forever, and Bitcoin or cryptos, because of the swings, can move a long way, can move sharply against you quite quickly. But we should know that anyway. You know that from looking at the market. Let's take a look at Ethereum. Do I have Ethereum on this one? I think they did enable it for me on this. Here we go. Ethereum's a funny one. I mean, Ethereum, I would say, looks stronger than Bitcoin. Yesterday, Ethereum traded up to a fresh all-time high. Traded up to 2,640. Again, it's off, what, $400 from those levels. So again, it's not far off a 20% move in the last couple of days. But, you know, obvious trends all over the shop, really. If we make this perhaps an hourly chart, see how far we can go back. There we go. Our trend for, well, pretty much this year looks something like that, doesn't it? Off the January lows, good few touches on that trend line. Got the trend line coming in around 1,700 on Ethereum. Good support at 1,900 through to 2,000. So again, for me, I'd probably wait for things to calm down a bit today, see how it looks next week, but lots of support in this 1,900 to 2,000 zone. So if I was a buyer of Ethereum next week, I'd be looking at stops below 1,900, I think. So, you know, it's sort of headline grabbing when these markets move, but it's not as if they're moving any different to how they've moved for much of this year. You know, if you're going to trade these markets, like the cryptocurrencies, you need to give them wide stops, don't you? That's the name of the game with these sort of markets. Gold and silver, let's do those. I did a trade on gold this week for myself, actually. I haven't done a trade on gold in my own account for a long time, but I bought it this week. Let's see. I mean, and I think gold's interesting because the correction is still in place for gold. So the correction in gold looks something like that. So I do accept that from a pure technical point of view, it probably isn't the most textbook of trades, but also the big trend for gold is still up, looking something like that. So we've got these converging trends at the moment, and from a purist point of view, the expectation would be that the longer term trend will trump the trend that's been in place since August last year. I think it's interesting the move we've seen over the last, 2 months? No, not 2 months, 6 weeks now. 1675 hit 8th of March, comes down to it again the 31st of March, and then over the last week we've sort of broken out of this double bottom, if you go for that sort of thing, and it's sort of pushing higher. So we do have something of a little recovery going on. So perhaps, I think, where it starts to get a bit interesting, I think if it can crack these old highs, 23rd of Feb highs, at about 18.15 gold, then perhaps it can get a bit of a move on. I think it will be quite some time before we see it back up at these levels from early January this year, but I did a trade on it. So this week, looking for it to see if it can push a little bit higher from here. We'll see what happens. But I think if you're a longer term buyer of gold, there's probably still plenty of, probably sitting on your hands, it's probably not a bad idea. You know, perhaps in the short term, we will see this trend continue to hold it down. So maybe it has a bit of a run and pulls back and you get a better entry point. For me, if it breaks 1675, I'll be out of the trade. And I think the risk is we will push back into the range or the area from April last year. But I thought it's probably the strongest it's looked for a while from a short-term point of view. At least it actually managed to break these highs from mid-March. So perhaps it has a little bit of a push higher. But maybe, you know, choppiness could still be the order of the day for gold. And the same for silver. You know, I've said silver's a strange one. I've said in the past there does seem to be quite a fanatical following among some silver people. And we do get what I think are some odd comments now and again on the silver videos we do. But they're always popular. And I just think it's a boring market. You know, I've said that a few times. Boring market. We do have a trade running, or a couple of trades running on this account on silver in there. But it is trading now at $26.20. It's trading where it was in August last year. And it's unchanged for the year. You know, silver ended last year at $26.35. So we're within 13 cents of where it ended last year. And we're pretty much 4 months into this year. So I think it's still a bit boring overall. But I do think in the short term, you know, we had had this correction that had been in place off the early Feb highs. And there is a little recovery going on. And I think that's what I talked about in yesterday's video for silver. So whilst the medium-term picture is still not that exciting overall, you know, we do have this little recovery going on in silver that's been going for all of this month. So we're still in that trend, nice little trend, chugging away, lots of support, 25.60 to 25.80. It's come down to 26 earlier today, and it's pushed up a bit higher. So it'll be interesting, but I think the level to watch on silver is about $26.60, about that sort of area. And you can see the highs from mid-March of last month. I think if we can break 26.60, then it starts to get a move on, and maybe we can start to look at 28 for silver. So I suppose, you know, from a short-term trading point of view, if we're a buyer at 26.22 with a stop, let's say a stop $1 away, down at 25.20. So we've got $1 risk and maybe a couple of dollars upside if it really gets a move on. So I think, you know, short term it's interesting. Medium term it's still a bit boring and a bit sideways, but I think you can see that as well as I can, can't you? Currencies. I did a trade on euro sterling this week as well, actually. We'll have a look at that one. But pound against the dollar. So it's been a pretty volatile week, even though we're sort of broadly unchanged. This is where we were a week ago here, this blue candle here. So we have had quite a push up, 200-point push up, given back a lot of those gains. But I do wonder, you know, for me, pound against the dollar, the approach for me would still be a buyer. You know, we had this trend in place. It's fallen below the trend line, but we've not seen a new downtrend fall. Just because something falls out of a downtrend, out of an uptrend, sorry, doesn't mean that trend's over. So for me, I'd still be a buyer, pound against the dollar. Good support from back here, February the 4th, 135.60. But what's interesting, I think, is what we've seen the last, what is it now, month or so. Trades down to 36.70. Trades down to 36.68, April the 12th. And we've pushed up and taken out these old highs. So if I had to do a trade now, I would be a buyer now. I think for me, if I was a buyer now at 138.50 with a stop the other side of 136.68, I think that's an interesting trade. So, you know, and really seeing if it can build a recovery from here. You know, we've seen good support at 136.60. 140 is clearly still a problem. But do we get a bit more of a recovery from here? And my target would be a run back up to 142 plus in the medium term. So I think it's definitely an interesting market to watch from here. I still think the bias is up for the pound against the dollar. Let's see what happens. And euro, I think I said last week I was hoping for a pullback in the euro, and we haven't had it yet. It's moved higher again over the last week. You know, if we went back to look at the trend since March of last year, if we went off those lows, and it looks, you know, something like that, I suppose, isn't it? It accelerated away from May, came back to that trend line. You know, we got big support, big euro support at 116. So, you know, it's very rare that markets do a handbrake turn. So I did think when we were seeing this happening, it looking like it was holding above the support, we might have a squeeze higher and a push back down and another bounce. We haven't had it though. It's just taken off. So I haven't been able to get a euro-US dollar trade on. And arguably you could say, okay, that correction is still in place. Perhaps it still looks it's a bit like gold, I suppose, in one way, where we have a longer term uptrend and a shorter term correction. So for me, if we did see some weakness from here, and if you look at the RSI, you know, we are overbought up here. So perhaps it is a bit overstretched in the short to medium term. For me, if it sells off and we get a bounce, that's maybe the better opportunity. So I'd still bullish on euro-US dollar medium term, but I'd rather it was a bit lower to buy it. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out. Let me show you. I did do a euro sterling trade for myself this week. I think it is in profit so far. And I think it's interesting, euro sterling. I never really look at it, but we had looked at it on a few live streams. And the reason why, and clearly nothing today is financial advice, but you know, the reason it was interesting to me, euro sterling, we've got these old historical levels back here at 82.70. So we're big levels from the past for the euro against the pound, late 2019, early 2020. The market had broken out of the trend line, but we'd also taken out these previous highs and sold off and had a bit of strength, and I ended up buying in here. So I was just buying the dip really in euro sterling. And what would be good next week, if we can break through these old highs at 87.20, then I think we could see the start of a much bigger recovery in euro sterling. It's early days. You know, my stop is the other side of these lows. So I bought in, I can't remember where I bought in, to be honest. Let's say it was 86.30, and my stop is probably a couple of 100 points away, near enough from where I bought in. So again, I'm looking for a swing up to here. We'll see if it happens. We'll see how it actually works out for the euro against the pound. And that's it, isn't it? I've done all the markets, haven't I? There's nothing I've missed out. So what I'll show you some other interesting markets. Then I'll go into the questions and look at your markets. But I know we've looked at these in the past. Palladium. It's a really interesting market, palladium. If we go back in time, I was looking back through some trading stuff. I said I was writing a course, and I was looking back through some trading stuff from 2019 and 2020. This was my most profitable market up until March of last year, because the trends were absolutely nuts in palladium. You can see the moves from, you know, August 2019 or September 2019. It went from 1,600 to 2,800. So we saw, what's that, a 70% move into February last year. Great trend. Then it got absolutely clobbered, pretty much halved during February and March last year. And it's been building this trend. And I put a trade on in, I think it was August of last year. I put my first trade on in palladium. So out of all the trades I've got, this is my longest running trade. So I've been in it since August last year. My longest running trade after that I put on just before Christmas. So, most of the trades I have open. I think I've got about 20 trades open at the moment for my own account that have all been done this year. But I've had this position in palladium since last summer. And what's interesting is we do have a trend banging along here, clearly. Nice little fourth touch of the trend line in March of this year. And it's breaking out. You know, it's breaking out. I'm guessing that's all-time highs in palladium that we're seeing this week. So for me, it's a really interesting market to watch. Next week, I'm thinking about, do I add to my position here? But it is, you know, finally starting to push through those late February 2020 highs. And you don't know if it's a real break or a false break. But for me, if I saw a bit of strength next week, I'd be tempted to be a buyer. So I think palladium's really interesting market. Then, of course, palladium's used in catalytic converters, isn't it? It's one of the things that palladium gets used for. Platinum, Again, it had been a good market for me over the years. We've had a good trend in platinum. I think I've still got a trade on from somewhere in platinum. Good trend since March last year. Pushed out to a multi-year high in February this year. Sold off then, been a bit sideways, but a good day today, platinum. I mean, clearly that trend is still up. And I don't think we cover soybeans, do we? Soybeans. No, we don't cover soybeans. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let me see. Hold on a second. Let me just flip this back. I think soybeans is another one. It feels like I've been in the trade forever, soybeans, but another perhaps slightly off the wall one, where this week they started breaking out. Hang on a second. Oh, there we go. You can see it. You can see it. So this is the third party charting out. So I think I've been in the trade since January. Soybeans. It's gone sideways, 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 and then we've had a bit of a move higher out to I don't know how high it's been. Multi-year high in soybeans. So some of the agricultural stuff really started moving again, which I thought is pretty interesting. And also, I think cotton as well. I think it's been a good week for cotton. We did look at this, didn't we? We looked at this last week and the week before. Great trend in cotton. Off the March lows, April lows last year. Pushed up to 95, sold off, came to the trend line, chopped around, and it's had a bit of a move again, bit of a move today. Some of the agri stuff has been looking, I think, a little bit interesting. But what I'll do now, I will jump into the questions and answer any questions you've got. I blew my account in today's Bitcoin move. Okay, well, I think hopefully it's not too much of an account to blow, hopefully, because, I think cryptos are crazy markets. I've always said that. I think they've sucked in a whole load of people to trading, but they don't trade like other markets normally. The volatility is off the scale, and I think if you, like I said, if I was buying Bitcoin now at 49,000, my stop would be, down at, I don't know, 42, 40,000. You need to give these markets room to move around. I think risk management, incredibly important part of trading. Everyone, not everyone, but most people ignore it. If your risk management's wrong, then you will not be alone in blowing yourself up. I'm sure plenty of people have got absolutely clobbered in this move in cryptos, and hopefully come back stronger and realise how important risk management actually is. Sugar, we didn't look at that, did we? Yeah, sugar. I've got a trade on sugar, and I was hoping to add to it, but it's run away a bit without me. But similar sort of thing that we saw in cotton, the chart in cotton. Great trend since April last year, when it was 0.09, whatever that was, cents, I don't know. And then traded up to nearly 19, came down, and again, it's had a really good move. So for me, I've got a position already. I was looking to add to it. I've missed it. If it sells off a bit next week, I think it's interesting because clearly we've got a bit of a level that's emerged now at 15 in sugar, but the trend is still up, So for me, medium term, my target would be for a run back up towards 19, 20 again in sugar, but another really interesting market. FTSE 100, we looked at that. Cocoa, we didn't look at cocoa, did we? Let's have a look at cocoa. I've got a trade in cocoa as well, actually. It's not going anywhere, though, at the moment. But I think I said last week, I got in far too early. I think I'm in from up here somewhere in cocoa. That trend is still up. That trend from 2017. So it's nearly the 4-year anniversary of that trend. The low was around about, late April, early May 2017. For me, this is almost the perfect setup now in cocoa. Clearly, nothing today is financial advice. Don't come after me if the bottom falls out of cocoa next week. But this is one of the many setups I look for. The market moves down, obvious trend here, support back here, has a little move, and then bounces and holds. So for me, if I was looking to trade it now, I'd be a buyer where it's trading now, 24, 28, 29. The closest I'd have my stop is under here, but actually I'd have it below here, below the November low, which is about 22.40. So a really interesting setup in cocoa, looking to see if it can turn it around and if it holds down at these levels. Cocoa, can we have a look at GU? What is GU? No, No idea what that is. If you can tell me what it is, I'll see if we cover it. Kazatomprom. If you can't find it, then Cameco. Let's have a look. Kazatomprom. No, we don't cover that. Cameco. There we go. Cameco produces uranium. Always a favourite, the uranium, isn't it, on the live stream. So Cameco Corporation produces and sells uranium worldwide. Okay, let's have a look. I would be a buyer, I think, of that one. From a trend point of view. I think there's an obvious place for a stop on this, actually. So let's have a look. But I think the only thing to be aware of, because there's been a lot of talk about uranium, and it's been mentioned on the chat a lot, I think it's just whether, has the move happened? I don't know. But it went from $12 in November, I'm assuming it's dollars, maybe it isn't, to 24 in March. Trend is clearly up. If I was a buyer now at $20.3, I put my stop the other side of this spike low, March the 5th low. So my stop would go in at maybe at 18, something like that. But it's an interesting one, I think. I think if we break 18, we're going to pull back into this old area here from early in January. But that trend is up for me, so I'd be looking for buying opportunities on that one. Okay, what else have we got? CrowdStrike. Let's have a look at that. Did we look at that one last week? CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is securities. Oh, we looked at that last week. I remember now. Yeah, the trend is up, isn't it? Trend is up. So where was it last week when we looked at it? 16th of April. So it's not exactly moved a lot in the last week. I mean, it's pushed out a bit to its best levels since early March. But the trend is still up, isn't it? The trend is up. The only problem I would have, if I was a buyer now, I'd want my stop down at 160. It's currently trading at 220. So it's a big old stop, 25% away, the stop. So, but the trend is up, you know. My target would be for a run back up to 250. But I'd rather be a buyer if it's sold off a bit from here. Because from the last 3 months, euro sterling is below in a year. So what do you think in coming weeks? Oh, for me, the euro sterling is just the potential reversal. That's all. We've seen it going down. We've had a bit of a turnaround. Is sentiment changing? I don't know, because no one knows, do they? But for me, the risk versus the reward makes it an attractive trade down here. But let's see how it turns out. Can we have a look at Nikola Corporation? Is that the electric car or electric vehicles? Is that the one though? Is this the one famously? Tell me if I'm getting it wrong. Is this the one that makes an electric van, and they filmed it, but they'd actually just given it a push to get it going? It didn't have any batteries in, or am I getting it? That's definitely a company. I can't remember which one it was. For me, the trend is down in that one. You know, the trend. Well, the trend is down, isn't it? So for me, I don't want to buy stuff that's going down. I want to buy stuff that's going up. And for me, you know, it's only a couple of days ago it hit its worst level since flotation. So for me, I wouldn't trade it anyway, but I would be looking for opportunities to sell short, which could be here actually, to be honest. You know, we've got, you know, a good downtrend in place, got lots of problems on the way up. You know, if it started breaking through, let's say $13, I think perhaps we've got the potential for a reversal. But, you know, when something looks like that, to me, it's pretty clear which way the trend is. So I'd rather stand aside until the trend has changed. So let's see. Can we look at dollar Canada? Yes, the dollar against the Canadian dollar. Let's have a look at that one. I think it's interesting, this, because it's almost a proxy. It moves quite similar to the dollar index now and again. I think, I'd have to say, I think you'd have to say the trend is down. You know, dollar against the Canadian dollar has gone from March last year, 146 to 125 at the moment. And it's almost like it's trying to have a go at coming out of the trend, but we haven't broken any previous highs. So for me, I think it will be, I suppose, if you wanted to be really aggressive in this trade, the trade to do, if you wanted to be aggressive and go against this trend, is to be a buyer at 125, where it's trading now, with a stop under the March low, which is 123.60. So let's say you go 123 as a stop. You've got 200 points risk, but if it's the start of a recovery for dollar Canada, you've got a lot of upsides. But for me, I'd probably rather still wait it out. It looked like it was trying to break out, but it hasn't. It hasn't done anything. It's gone sideways for the month. So I think it's a really interesting one to watch, but I wouldn't feel personally that compelled to do much on that one at the moment. Let's see. Sugar, copper. Did we look at copper? I don't think we did we? We looked at the others. Copper's interesting, isn't it? I did a video on copper this week, actually. That's it. So we did a video on copper earlier this week, and I do have an order to buy at 4.4. It's interesting, copper. Again, this is one that I've traded over the last 6 to 8 months or so because the trend has been great. Punched out in Feb to its best levels. It wasn't quite 10-year highs, I think, from memory. Best levels since the summer of 2011. And I think what's interesting is next week in copper. Are we going to see a breakout again? So for me, the level to watch, 436 is the level to watch in copper. So the trend is clearly still up. If I was a buyer, if it broke out next week, I think I would want my stop the other side of this congestion zone. So the other side of 385. So I think it's a really interesting market to watch next week, copper. Euro sterling, we did that. Is it Dogecoin, Dogecoin? What is it? I don't even know how to pronounce it. I do know it is, even by crypto standards, this is an absolute lunatic market, isn't it? So it went from 0.4 on the 19th of April, which was, when was that? Monday, to 0.15 today. Again, I think, like I said last week, if you've bought it and you've made money, congratulations. I would not trade a market like that at all, personally. So there we go. Let's see. Sugar, we looked at sugar. What else have we got? We looked at copper. Can we have a look at Pinterest? Okay, let's have a look at that. We have looked at these before, haven't we? Let's take a look at that. Pinterest. It's a bit of a more normal market. So again, for me, it all starts with the trend, and the trend is clearly up on Pinterest. Although it hasn't really gone anywhere for the last couple of months. If I had to do anything now, I'd be a buyer. So I'd be a buyer at 74.60-ish, wherever it's trading now. And I would want my stop the other side of 60, which again is a 20% stop, but it's been a pretty volatile share over the last couple of months, hasn't it, Pinterest? So, I think there are probably more exciting looking charts out there, but for me, the trend in Pinterest is definitely up, isn't it? Alphabet, so Google, Alphabet. What do we call it? Do we call it Google or do we call it? Let's look at Google. There we go. The trend is up, not surprisingly. Hit fresh all-time highs by the look of it. This week, actually, hit fresh all-time highs this week. So again, the only question would be for me, do I buy it now at 22.64, or do I wait to see if there's a pullback? It's always an issue. It's always difficult buying into strength. If I was a buyer now, the closest I'd want my stop, the other side of $2,000 a share, is how I would trade that one. But the trend is still up. S&P, blah, blah, blah. Oh, crude oil. You're right. We missed crude oil. Thank you for the reminder. Because that is an interesting market for next week, crude oil. I thought I'd missed something. So crude oil, let's go back in crude oil. The trend from April last year, so when the cash price traded below 12, famously the May contract went negative last year. The trend is still up in crude oil. We'd had the market banging around the last week of March and into April. Then we had a breakout last week and it's come back. For me, 57 has been a really important support level for crude oil. So for me, I'd be looking to buy now. We'd had that breakout out of the sideways range. So it's spent, a good few days out. It's been knocked back into it. I would be a buyer. Maybe that's the trade we'll do. Let's do that trade in crude, because I think we've had a breakout out of the sideways zone. It's sold off a bit. We've pushed back a bit into the zone, and we've held. So the trade I'm going to do, we're going to buy crude at 61.77. The closest I want my stop is $60.50. I'll give it a bit more leeway than that and go in at 60 on crude. So let's set that trade up. So we normally risk 100 quid on these live trades on crude. So what's 70 barrels? 91 quid. So if we do 77 barrels, 76 barrels, 75, 74, there we go. We buy 74 barrels of crude, where it's trading now, 61.89. Stop at 60, risk £100. Go. Done. There we go. That's the live stream trade of the day. Let's see how that performs. But I think it's interesting, that we've seen the sell-off in crude. It made a base yesterday at $60.50. Let's see if we can recover into next week and push back up to $64 plus on crude. That's what I think anyway. But from a bigger picture point of view, even if we drop back below 60 over the next week, I'd still be looking to see if we see strength come in ahead of this old 57 support. Alibaba. Do you know we've got a short on Alibaba from ages ago, 29th of January. I remember we did it in a live stream. Went short at 257 and they're 232. Now, let's take a look at them. Let's see. I can't even remember why we went short. So back in January, here somewhere, 257 here. Oh, I probably wouldn't want to be short anymore, actually. Now I've actually looked at this again. Because I think if there's our trend, a big trend going back from 2016. So we're 5 years into this trend now. I would be a buyer now. Maybe I should adjust that trade we've got open. I think we've seen good support at 210 there on Alibaba, whatever you call it. So I'll be a buyer. So let's close that short, shall we? Well, there we go. That did okay though. In the end, we risked 100 quid and we made 123 quid. Let's get out of that. There we go. Gone. So interesting one there though. Coming back to the trend. Also, we looked at dollar Canada, Tesla. They had that crash, didn't they? Fatal crash. Was it at the weekend? But again, there is of autopilot when it's on autopilot. But there is suggestion or rumour or whatever that perhaps there was nobody in the driving seat. Who knows? But there's the trend in Tesla. Trend is still up. The time to buy it was here, $600 back at the end of March. If I was a buyer now at 729, the closest I'd want my stop, the absolute closest would be the other side of 700. Probably I'd want it down here though, at 539. So I think the trend is still up in Tesla. So the better setup for me would be a bit of weakness over the next week. That would be a better setup, but the trend is definitely up in Tesla. Natural gas, yes, I've got a trade on natural gas. We got trades in here on natural gas actually. I think they're the best performing trade. So if you haven't watched these before, when we do the YouTube videos during the week, I do a trade, and there's trades in natural gas. They all got filled separately, but from the 5th of April, natural gas bought in at 255. Let's have a look at the charts, and I've got, in my own account, I've got trades on natural gas. And it did have a bit of a move yesterday, didn't it? It's interesting, natural gas, I think, because we had this great trend last year in natural gas, then it sold off, then I thought it was going to get a move on. It's all been a little bit sideways, but we've got more recent support down around about 2.4. I think the fact it's it's cracked 270 is positive. We do have something of a short-term recovery going on in natural gas. I knew there was a sharp move yesterday. That was a sharp move yesterday in gas. So for me, well, I'm long anyway. if I was a buyer now, the absolute closest I'd have my stop would be the other side of yesterday's lows. That is pretty tight though. They're at 273, yesterday's low. So for me, I'd be looking to be a buyer on dips. But it's a bit of a crazy old market, natural gas. You know, I think if it can clear 290, then I think we can have a run into the threes for gas. So we'll see. We'll see how it works out. CP Rail listed on the TSX in Canada announced a 5-for-1 split. In your experience, after the split, will prices tend to go up or fall back? What have you seen in your experience? Well, splits are interesting. I mean, Tesla did a split, didn't it? The argument behind splits, and Apple, I think, as well, is it makes the stock more attractive. You know, rather than having a stock that's $3,000, you do a 5-for-1 split, and the stock is $600. So companies do it, you know, arguably to provide more liquidity. So in theory, it should be more attractive to investors, but I would never use that as a reason to open the position, if that makes sense. Okay, Canadian Pacific Railway, is that the one? CP Rail. I mean, the trend is up anyway for those, so it's a nice trend if that is the one you're talking about. It's a great little trend chugging away. So I definitely, again, you know, good support recently at 347. So from 330 to 347, good support if that's the one. But it looks interesting. We looked at copper, Aussie dollar, Canadian dollar. Let's take a look at that one. How are we doing for time? We're out of time. Before we do that, let me just do the contact details. Obviously, go to Capital.com. You know, today, you know, this is the Capital.com YouTube channel. It's the Capital.com platform we're using for today. Go to Capital.com to open an account and trade and download the apps. I've got a Facebook page where I put trading stuff on when I remember during the week. That's davidjonestrading.com. That will take you there. Any questions after today, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com, and on Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets. And of course, follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We'll come back to that at the end, but I thought I'd shove that in now. Aussie dollar, Canadian dollar. I don't know. It's a bit messy, isn't it? I don't know. I would probably, in the short term, I'd be tempted to be a buyer in the short term, I think, because it looks like we've had a correction from here, the Feb highs, and it's trying to build a recovery. So if I had to do a trade on the Australian dollar against the Canadian dollar, I'd be a buyer. The closest I'd want my stop, the other side of 96.20, probably a bit further away than that though, down here. I think that's an interesting one actually, that maybe it's turning around this old correction. So let's see what happens. Can we have a look at DraftKings? Let's have a look, DraftKings. I don't know if we cover them. We do cover them. I don't know, it's a bit boring, isn't it? Is it the gambling, sports, entertainment and gaming? That's it. I think they're weren't they a UK company and they listed in the US? I don't know. I think to me, it looks a bit boring. I would say that the correction from March, sorry, this is an hourly chart. Let's make it a daily chart. This maybe makes it a bit, I don't know. So they only floated in the summer of last year. I suppose I would probably have to say that trend is still just about up. I think while we hold above 52, 49 to 52, that trend is still just about up. So if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. But I might be a bit more patient, I think, before being a buyer. I mean, it's been a great performer since it came to the market. You know, $31 in July last year, touched 72 in March. So I'd be looking to be a buying opportunity. Do you think oil will hit $100 after the summer? I don't actually know. I'm really surprised how well oil's done. But given what's going on in the world, can we see the oil 50% higher again than here? I can't quite see it myself. But you know, we have seen some crazy markets in the last year, so could happen. Platinum, we looked at platinum. Virgin Galactic. Let's take a look at those. Virgin Galactic. This one has some crazy swings, doesn't it? Again, going from a trend point of view, it's bang on the 12-month, 13-month trend line. So if you were going to buy it anywhere from a technical point of view, then we're here pretty much. So the problem is, where does your stop go, doesn't it? I mean, it's clearly it is very volatile. You know, it was $36 5 weeks ago, and it was $20 3 days ago. You know, so you need to give it a bit of room. But I suppose if you fancied a punt, then buying it down here with a stop, I don't know, it's 16 or something. Looks interesting, but it's a bit of a crazy one, isn't it? Okay. Open Door. Open Door. What do they do? Open Door. No, so it doesn't look like we cover those. Sorry. Fresnillo. So UK silver company. It's interesting. They've just been going down. So for me, it still looks pretty weak. I suppose it's mimicking and a bit worse than what silver's done. You know, clearly got pushed up in the summer of last year with the silver price hitting whatever it was, 7-year high, I think it was. And it's just been weak since then. So for me, I wouldn't be a buyer. I probably wouldn't be a seller either. But it needs to sort itself out and come out of this downtrend. But for me, it looks a little bit boring at the moment. Fresnillo. NIO. It's the Chinese thingy company, isn't it? Electric car company. Again, I mean, it is a bit of a sort of Tesla tracker in a way, isn't it, in terms of what the share price does. I mean, for me, if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer. So I'd be a buyer at 40, where it's trading now. The closest I want my stop, the other side of the March the 5th low. The March 5th low was 31.76. So for me, even though it's sort of faffing around with the trend line, that trend is still up for me. You know, we got higher highs and higher lows. So for me, I'd still be a buyer. Can we look at sterling yen? Yes, I've still got my trades on in sterling yen. Let's have a look at that. It's pretty volatile the last few days, isn't it? I'd be a buyer if I didn't have any trades on. I'd be a buyer, but I probably wouldn't be a buyer today. I'd wait till Monday. I think it's interesting because it's actually. I think I mentioned I did a trade on it back in February because someone mentioned it on a live stream. I hadn't looked at it before, and it's been my biggest winner this year, this calendar year, sterling yen. And we've got lots of support at 147, and it did push out earlier this month to its best levels in quite a few years, and it's pulled back. For me, it's still a bit weak. If we had a bit of strength on Monday, I could be tempted to be a buyer with a stop, and I would go the other side of 147, personally. Of course, there's the risk for those of you who are fans of patterns that turns into a head and shoulders. I'm not a fan of patterns, but I'm sure pattern fans out there will have spotted that. But yeah, for me, the trend is still clearly up. It's just how deep a pullback do we get if it starts breaking down from here. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Sand. What's sand? Did we look at those before? It rings a bell. Sand. No idea what that is, but I think that's the thing. Is that the one? Don't know what it is. Hang Seng 50. Let's take a look at that. We never normally look at that, do we? Hang Seng 50. It's I suppose in a way I think it's similar in terms of what we're seeing going on with the Nikkei. You know, we had these multi-year high hit in February and hasn't really done much since then. I'd still be tempted to be a buyer, you know, even though it's almost like a last chance saloon type trade for me, where we had this trend that had done a good job on the way up. It's fallen out of the trend line, but for me, I think, well, let's give it one more chance. So I could be tempted to be a buyer with a stop the other side of that low, whatever that low is, 27,700. So I think it's interesting. the Hang Seng. But yeah, I think if it breaks 27,700, then for me, any hope of an uptrend is over. So, but interesting one to watch next week. Dogecoin, whatever it's called, we did do that earlier. It's Cloudflare. Let's have a look at Cloudflare. Cloudflare. What do they do? American web infrastructure and website security company, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So again, I think generally speaking, the difficult thing probably over the last few months is that so much stuff has accelerated away from what were before, like longer term trends. If you look at this one from October last year, but it doesn't change the fact the trend is still up. The problem is because it's moved away so far from where it's been trading historically, is where my stop loss would need to go. So for me, that's bullish. We're seeing a bullish move today at 81, breaking out to its best levels in about 2 months today. But I'd probably still want my stop based on the daily chart to the other side of 60, which is a long way away when it's trading 81 today. So for me, it's bullish. I'd rather buy a pullback, but the trend definitely still seems to be up, doesn't it? So yeah, looks like a good one. Sandstorm Gold was sand. Let's take a look at those. Sandstorm Gold. Let's have a look. Again, I think what we're seeing here, a bit like Fresnillo, is mimicking to an extent the move in the price of gold. But for me, this looks an interesting one from a reversal trade point of view, because we have had that downtrend in place. We had a little move out the downtrend. So again, at this point, I'd be expecting it to go back down here, but the fact we've seen strength again suggests that perhaps we've got a reversal on our hands. So for me, I'd be looking to be a buyer. Whether you buy here, do you wait for a pullback? The tightest I want my stop, the other side of these lows, March the 30th lows, but ideally the other side is $7.50. I'm assuming it's dollars. But it's interesting, I think, that one, for the potential for something of a reversal. I don't think we cover aluminium. Someone's mentioned aluminium. I don't think we cover that as a market. Oh, yes, we do. I haven't got that much history, but it looks really bullish. So based on the, what's that, 5 months of data, it's hitting fresh highs for the last 5 months at least. So for me, clearly the trend in aluminium is up. So yeah, I'd be tempted to be a buyer. The closest I'd have my stop would be down at 2,200 on this one. It's interesting, a lot of these, not agricultural, the metals, have really got to move on again this week. But that looks like a really interesting market. Right, I think we are going to wrap things up now because I've been going for an hour. So we normally do an hour on these things. So as usual, go to Capital.com to find out more about the company, open an account, all that sort of stuff. DavidJonesTrading.com is my website, or it's a Facebook page at the moment. I occasionally put trading stuff on there. Any questions about trading, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com, and Twitter @JonesTheMarkets. Follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. If you could, if you're not subscribed, you're watching on YouTube now, if you could click on subscribe, that'd be great. We do 3 videos during the week. We looked at copper, silver, and was it gold this week? Can't remember. But we do regular videos as well as these live streams. If you're subscribed with the notification pushed, then we'll you get a notification on YouTube when we go live. I'm going blank. It's Friday afternoon. Going blank. Can you help me with support and resistance? Sure. Send me an email, and I'll try and help you. But that's it. We'll wrap it up. Thanks for coming along. Lots to watch next week. Stock market's still strong. Let's have a quick look. What is the S&P doing in trade today after yesterday's sharp sell-off? Oh, there we go. It's recovering. It's not really a surprise, I don't think, that we're seeing something of a recovery. But stock markets clearly, because they are still strong. Crude oil's interesting. Oh, we are making a bit of money on that little trade on crude oil. So where's the trade? What's the date today? 23rd of April. So we're up 18 quid on the trade that we did on crude. Interesting to see if it can recover next week. Pound and euro are interesting because they've pulled back. Bitcoin, of course, the crazy cryptos, because it's knocked back 20%. We'll be watching to see if strength comes back in next week. Silver, we've got the little recovery going on, and gold Is it going to manage to have some sort of meaningful rally? Lots to watch. We'll come back next Friday and do it all again. But until then, have a good weekend and good luck with your trading.